Okay, I wanted to play through this passage for you first. I apologize for the piano, but it's a little out of tune. It's the beginning of the semester. We haven't had a chance to get everything tuned yet. So we start out on a 1 chord, then we go to 7 diminished to 5, going to 5, 7 diminished to 4, going to 4, 7 diminished to 5, going to 5, 7 diminished to 4, going to 4, and then we get to our real 5 chord. We're on a really solid 5/7 at that point. The whole point of this passage was to go from 1 to 5. I'm going to pause for a second and move to the board, and then we'll continue. Okay, so up at the top, the first time through, because this is a weird passage and I didn't understand what was going on at first glance either. So I left Roman numerals out of it. First thing that I did was between the treble and the bass clef, between the grand staff in the middle line where the middle C is, I just wrote the names of the chords that I was finding on each eighth note. So I had this D, and I left out inversions at this point because I'm really just looking at the harmonic function. First, you'll notice that each one of these is an eighth note. Previous to this passage and a couple others like it in this piece, the harmonic rhythm was moving, chord changes once a bar, once every half note or whole note. Like it was much slower, and the harmonic frequency of change increased greatly at this point, which told you that something interesting was going on. So the first thing, we have a D chord, we have a G sharp diminished, we have an A major, F sharp diminished, G major, G sharp diminished 7 going to A, F sharp diminished 7 going to G, and then we end with a big A7. So in the foreground, that's what's happening. Each one of these chords is there, foreground being all the details of the piece. And we're talking about kind of a Schenkerian approach at this point. As we take a step back and blur our eyes just a little bit to some of the details that aren't structurally important, they're just on the surface, kind of surface details that aren't affecting the movement of the piece. These diminished chords are all secondary diminished chords pointing at 5 or 4, and I've detailed what all those are here. So here we have, I even got a couple of inversions in there, but we have a 7 diminished or secondary leading tone chord pointing to 5, and then we have a secondary leading tone chord pointing to 4, and then another one pointing to 5, this time with a 7th on it. These were just triads, I believe, if I remember correctly. And then these two were 7 diminished pointing to 4 and 7 diminished pointing to 5. Fully 7 diminished 7th chords with the 3rd left out of both of these, if I remember correctly. But they're decorating 5 and 4. All of these secondary diminished chords are superfluous. They're not structurally important, so you can filter them out. And if you look then, we have 1, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5. And the fact that these are happening so quickly allows us to look at these 2 4 chords as kind of, I don't know if anyone else uses this term, but they're like neighbor tones, except instead of a neighbor tone being a neighbor note on the melody, this is a neighbor chord. So 5 just shifts down to 4 chord and shifts right back up to 5, and then shifts down to 4 and goes right back up to 5. This 4 is really just a decoration. And if you take those out, those decorations, so we've taken out the diminished chord decorations, we've taken out the 4 chord decorations, and then we can see we just go from 1 to 5, 5, 5. We don't need multiple 5s. We can just say that this passage is taking us from our 1 chord to our 5 chord. And that's really the point of this passage. The exciting thing about this is what real music looks like, as we talked about with my class yesterday. This is genius level music. This is what Mozart does. When Mozart wants to go from a 1 to a 5, and he wants a bunch of surface motion and interest, this is a way that he can do that. And we're going to look at another way that he goes from 5 to 1 in another really interesting way. That'll be the next video. So again, if you have any questions or if I'm being unclear about anything, drop a comment on there and I'll try to clarify it either in a comment or in the video when I redo it next year. Thank you very much. See you in the next video.